It's good to see that we got rid of the riffraff. Now we have the serious students here, right? Yeah. People who really know what RoundUp is about. The topic for this year, Restoration History, was suggested by one of you. So if you don't like the topic, someone here is to blame, okay? In fact, when they first requested this topic and said, would you like to teach us, my reaction was, no thank you. And let me tell you why. 3 reasons why. First of all, because there aren't a lot of visuals to go along with this topic. When Tim Neese teaches Roman history or World War I, it has all these neat artifacts up here, right, and models and pictures and maps and things. Restoration history is more intellectual history. So there are no suits of armor, there are no miniature models up here. In fact, I decorated with my favorite decorating style, books. That's what we're going to be talking about. Second reason I didn't want to do is because some of you don't care about restoration history, right? Some of you are not part of Churches of Christ, or maybe you were at one point, but you're not anymore. Maybe you are, but this just doesn't interest you a whole lot. And if this is you, I hear you. Okay. I'll get that in a minute.
Does everybody have a book?
You're good. Some of you don't care about restoration history, and the third reason is some of you care about restoration history a little too much. You know what I mean? Because you are not invested in the Roman Empire, right? We like talking about the empire versus the republic, but that's not going to change the way you do things on a daily basis, right? For restoration history, you're invested in that. This is not just your heritage, this is your identity, this is who you are. And so you don't want somebody coming along and challenging the things you've held so dear all of your life. So those are 3 good reasons not to teach the class. I think I'll stop there. So why did I agree to teach a class? Well, to answer that question, I need to tell a story. When I was a student at York College back in the 20th century, it was a 2-year school at that point. And so you came to York 2 years and had to go on somewhere else to finish your bachelor's degree, right? And restoration history was taught as a course here. I think Tommy Schultz taught it. But I didn't want to take it. I took only the Bible classes, but I didn't want to take, I said, why do I care what Alexander Campbell said? I just want to know what the Bible says, right? I'm not a Campbellite, I'm a Christian. I'm a New Testament Christian. I don't care what Campbell said, I don't care what Stone said, I just want to know what the Bible says. So I didn't take restoration history. I go down to Abilene to finish my degree, and it's required, church history and restoration history. And I said the same thing, I don't care what Campbell says, I just want to know what the Bible says. And one of my professors wisely responded and said, you know why you think that? Because that's part of your heritage. You grew up in a tradition that downplays tradition. Blew my mind. It opened my eyes to the fact that history shapes me in ways that I'm not even aware of. In fact, it's the history that I'm not aware of that shapes me in more profound ways than the history I'm aware of. Because if I'm not aware of it, it's subconscious. You know, that's just the way we do things. Why do you do that? Well, that's the way you do it, right? If it's history I'm aware of, I can critique it. I can look at it and say, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. But if it's not aware of it, it's below the surface. That's just the way it's always been done. So the irony is I denied the importance of history because I grew up in a movement that denied the importance of history. It's a classic example of the quote by George Santayana. Those who are ignorant of the past are destined to repeat it. Right? I was just repeating, I was being a good restorationist by saying I don't care about restoration history. So this set me up on a journey to learn about my past, guided by men like Bill Humble and Leonard Allen and Doug Foster and Tom Albright. I began to learn more and more about my history, my heritage. And I've seen how it's shaped me in both ways, both good and bad. And so I'm hoping this class might do a little bit of that for you. I can open your eyes a bit to maybe investigate further. Why do we think this? Why do we do things that way? Because much we like to talk about going back to the Bible and doing Bible things in Bible ways, we've all been shaped by our heritage, right? By our personal history, by the history that's gone on before us, It shaped our parents and our grandparents. Now it shaped us. So important question. How many of you have ever had a class or studied Restoration history? Okay, majority here. All right. Let's find out how much of that stuff. One question. Barton W. Stone. What does the W stand for? Wilbur, Warren, Westhauser, Walker. Yeah, Warren. Martin Warren stuff. Okay, just checking. So if you had a class in church history or Restoration history, if you did like a quarter in church on this, you probably spent 13 weeks on it. We only have 8 sessions. So we can't go as in depth even as you might in a church quarter. So we're going to go a little quicker, look at more big picture things. We'll slow down occasionally to focus on some individual. There are individuals who are of immense importance we're not going to talk about. And there are events that are huge events in Restoration history we're not going to spend much time on. Just because we don't have the time. But we are going to try and dig in some places and find out what we can. So to set the stage, my remotes, this is on. No, I need the one that's the AV remote.
If it doesn't work, you need to use the keyboard.
These are on mute. So does the keyboard do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened to the keyboard?
It's up here. Well prepared we are. Yes, we are. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's it right there. Yeah, this one. Thank you.
Turn things on and use them.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
So as I said last night, we're starting with section 2. Okay, you're already behind. Because what I was going to do in session 1 was talk about 1,500 years of church history in 45 minutes. And what we're going to do is say, here's how the Protestant Reformation in Europe set the stage for what happened in the United States, the Restoration history part. We're just going to kind of give that as a given. We're going to start with the good old USA. We're going to talk about America, right? The New World. Because it was a New World which provided the ideal environment for something like the Restoration movement to happen. Why? Well, because America is seen as uncorrupted and undefiled. European cities were crowded, they were dirty, they were filled with garbage, the air was polluted. To those who immigrated from new land, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like Eden itself. Pristine and undefiled by human imposition, this is the perfect place to recover the pure, uncorrupted Christianity. Most of you have seen this painting before. A lot of us know it by Manifest Destiny. That's not actually the name of it. It's American Progress. But it's the idea of personification of manifest destiny. You notice on the far right-hand side, the sun is rising. Yes, ma'am?
I just wondered if we could adjust the lights.
Can we hit the lights back there in the front row? Good point. Better? I have no idea what my notes say. John Gast, 1875, American Progress, personifying manifest destiny, moving westward to the new land. Second, the experiment in democracy seemed to be the sort of government that God had planned. The government seemed as fresh and pure as the new land itself. Thomas Paine, friend of Thomas Jefferson, said, "This is the beginning of a new world. We are brought at once to the point of seeing government begin as if we had lived at the beginning of time, unmutilated by contrivance or the errors of tradition." So he's saying, we don't care about all this tradition, all this history has gone before. We're something new here. This is God's new land. And if the founding fathers can establish God's government, could the church do any less with reestablishing God's religion? So that leaves us to number 3, there's independence from European churches. Just as the new world, the new land, the new government was getting a fresh new start, so it made sense to get a fresh start in a religious sense as well. Why be held in bondage by centuries of traditions and teachings and practices when we're in a new land? A lot of those things don't make sense here anymore, especially on the American frontier. So just as they long for a more democratic form of government, they long for a more democratic form of religion. And we're going to see that expressed in many different ways. Fourth, the American colonies were religiously diverse. In Europe, every country had an official state religion. So if you were born in Italy, what kind of Christian were you? Catholic. If you were born in Germany, what kind of Christian were you? Lutheran. If you were born in Switzerland, what kind of Christian were you? Reformed, yeah. Calvin, Zwingli, Zurich, Switzerland. If you're born in France, what kind of Christian were you? Catholic. If you're born in England, what kind of Christian were you? Okay, well, it kind of depends when we were born in England, right? But it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, it's Church of England, otherwise it's okay. So, Anglicans, if you're born in Spain, what kind of Christian are you? Okay, so where you were born determines the kind of Christian you are all throughout Europe, but that was not the case in the New World. By 1700, no one group of Christians was sufficiently strong to impose its ways on any single colony. Every colony had its own official state religion. It was supported by the taxes of the people, but it couldn't dominate the scene. It couldn't call the shots. There was a wide variety of religious groups in the New World. I mean, you had Lutherans, you had Baptists, you had Anglicans, Congregationalists, Presbyterians, Reformed in different stripes. I mean, look here, the colors aren't coming out real well. Ooh, not well at all. But the Congregational part up here in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Congregationalists are related to the Puritans who came over and settled. Those were Congregationalists. Anglicans are down here in the southern part, Virginia, North and South Carolina. These people came from the Church of England and established here. But you had a smattering of other things all throughout here. Rhode Island was established by Roger Williams, not Robin Williams, Roger Williams, as a place of religious liberty. A place where even Baptists could go, because nobody liked Baptists, nobody hated Baptists. And so Rhode Island was established with the capital being called what? The capital of Rhode Island. Providence, yeah, the providence of God. This is the New World. And this is a place of religious liberty. Even Catholics, Jews, and Muslims were welcome in Rhode Island. The other colony is called the cesspool of the colony, because they won't take any, even Baptists can go to Rhode Island. Now here's another chart, maybe a better color here. Lutherans, kind of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York. So, a variety of religious groups competed for attention in the marketplace of the New World. Now, by the way, which of these groups do you think was the dominant religious group of the Founding Fathers? Anglican or Episcopalian, yeah. 54% of the Founding Fathers were Episcopalian by religious preference, which creates its own interesting dynamic, right? Because the Founding Fathers, or the Church of England, who is the head of the Church of England? The King of England, right. Well, the Founding Fathers are fighting a war of independence from who? The King of England. So they're fighting this war of political independence from the King of England. Meanwhile, they're part of a church where the head of the church is the King of England. It really creates some awkward situations there. So the Episcopalians kind of is the American side of the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. And then fifth, there were millennial expectations. For centuries, many had dreamed of an age of justice and righteousness and peace on earth, but that time had just not arrived. All the religious wars in Europe. Instead, Europeans were oppressed, and the freedom to worship and to speak and to write your own opinions and convictions was practically unimaginable. But now in this new land, new opportunities, a new constitution, and guaranteed of freedoms that simply boggled the mind of many of the people in Europe. So July 4th, 1776, I'm not going where you think I'm going. July 4th, 1776, Congress appointed Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams to come up with a seal. They've got the Declaration, but we need a seal, an emblem to represent our new nation. Imagine this is your job. So Benjamin Franklin came up with the idea of the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The children of Israel fleeing from Egypt through the part of waters of the Red Sea. Why would he choose that story? Hey, what's the parallel? Slavery, yeah. Put out of slavery to a tyrant king, right? In the land of freedom and prosperity. There's the parallel, right? And Jefferson had a similar thing. It wasn't the Exodus itself, it was the wilderness wanderings. The children of Israel wandering through the wilderness, being led by what? During the day it was a pillar of cloud, by the night it was a pillar of fire. This was Jefferson's idea. He heard Franklin's and thought we could work together. So Jefferson took Franklin's idea and kind of reshaped it, and they presented it to Congress. Okay, now these guys, Franklin and Jefferson, they were among the more liberal of the founding fathers anyway. But you see, when they had to come up with a seal to represent what we're about, they went to the biblical story of the Exodus. Now ultimately that idea was rejected. What did we get for the seal? Huh. You recognize this? All right. So why do we have it? So what's going on here? What's being built? And how many rows of stone in the pyramid do you think there are? 13. You don't have to count them, do you? Because of 13 colonies. Now where's the pyramid standing? What's around it? Not the ocean, but the look colors it. It's what? It's wilderness. Deserted wilderness. Out of the deserted wilderness, God is raising up something new and magnificent. NDCCLXXVI. What's that? Well, no, the bottom here. The Roman numerals. What year is that? 1776. Foundation, 1776. God has created something new here. And up at the top is the what? The all-seeing eye of God. Yeah. And by the way, Anus Queptus. He has smiled on our beginnings. He who? God. God is overlooking and approving of our new beginning. Novus Ordem Secularum, a new order for the ages. So out of the wasteland of the world, God has started a new order, a new thing, this new fantastic opportunity, and He is overseeing the whole thing. And notice the pyramid is unfinished, because there's still work to be done. But the foundation has been laid. We're exciting new things are going to happen here. So given all this, the New World seemed like a logical place to get rid of the European baggage and just get back to religion as God intended for it to be. This was a common sentiment in the days of the early founding fathers. No less than Thomas Jefferson himself said, "When we shall have unlearned everything which has been taught since Jesus' day, and got back to the pure and simple doctrines He inculcated, we shall then be truly and worthily His disciples." In my opinion is that if nothing had ever been added to what flowed from His lips, the whole world would, to this day, have been Christian. So TJ himself is saying, look, if we had just added all this baggage and history, Christianity would be everywhere. Everybody would be a Christian, right? But it's all these traditions that were added, these different practices, these different ideas over centuries. Just let's scrap that and get back to the original thing. Here's Jefferson's quote. All right. So that's historical background where we're going. The Methodists were part of a movement started by John Wesley. Wesley was Anglican, Church of England, grew up in the Church of England, 1735. John and his brother Charles Wesley came to the United States of America, Savannah, Georgia, to do mission work, primarily thinking among the Native Americans, although they ended up more working with the colonists in Georgia. The work was not very successful, and they only stayed less than 2 years before they headed back to England. And when he returned to England, John had this conversion experience of sorts. And at this point, his goal was, to quote, to reform the nation, he's talking about England, particularly the church, and to spread scriptural holiness over the land. His passion and his methods were increasingly in tension with the existing Anglican church. He would do crazy stuff, like preach out on the streets, Instead of in the cathedrals, he's out there in the street corners preaching to people. What's wrong with this guy, right? And he formed societies of people who spent time in prayer and Bible study. Where is he getting these ideas? And the Anglican Church was a bit, yeah, that's right. And so there was a tension building here. The Methodism grew rapidly, and they were sending missionaries out all over the world. And so Wesley sent Thomas Coke to the United States. And on Christmas Day, 1784, the Methodist Episcopal Church was born. Great Christmas conference. This is what we're talking about. Look, we're part of the Church of England, but we just declared independence from the King of England. Awkward. Let's start a different group. Let's be Methodist, Episcopalian Methodist Church. 1784. And Francis Asbury is being ordained. Thomas Coke, who was sent over by John Wesley, chose a partner, Francis Asbury, and he ordained him. So now there are two superintendents over the church, the Methodist Church in America. Well, next year, Coke returned to England, leaving Francis Asbury in charge. And since Asbury began taking the title of bishop for himself. Bishop, doesn't that sound nice? Bishop. Bishop Asbury. Now, Wesley himself didn't like that term, advised against it, but Asbury liked the idea. And at that Christmas convention in 1784, one of the men who was chosen as elder of the Methodist Church was a guy named James O'Kelly. He was also one of the original duck hunters, I think. Circuit riding preacher, duck hunter, well known for his abolitionist views. He wrote one of the very first anti-slavery tracts in the New World. He's a friend of Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry. And like Jefferson and Henry, he argued passionately for religious reform, religious independence. And here we've got to get this chance of independence, and we've got one guy, Francis Asbury, calling all the shots. And he thought, this isn't right. It's not right to have one man calling the shots for the church. We should be a more, democratic form of religious organization. And so at the General Conference in 1792, O'Kelly and his supporters argued for this democratic form of church government. We don't need one guy calling the shots. After a long debate, O'Kelly and the others were voted down. The next day they gave notice, okay, look, we're out of here. We're not being part of this conference anymore if this is what it means. Well, the group called on Francis Asbury and to hold a meeting to talk about things, to form a permanent plan for peace and union, taking the Holy Scriptures for our God. Which is a good idea. Asbury refused to even meet with them. And so the group had no choice but to officially break ties with the Methodist Episcopal Church. And so they established the Methodist Republican Church. So Methodist, but we're going to have a Republican form of government. Not just one man calling the shots. But they struggled with this. And 2 years later, 1794, 6,000 people who are no longer Methodist Episcopalians gathered and are trying to figure out, who are we? What does this mean? And decide their future course of action. How do we organize ourselves as a church? And eventually a man named Rice Haggard, he stood before the group, and you're going to remember that name. How do you forget a name like Rice Haggard? I mean, what mother would name their kid Rice? I don't know. He held the Bible and said, "Brethren, this is a sufficient rule of faith and practice. And by it we are told disciples were called Christians. And I move that henceforth and forever that the followers of Christ be known as Christians." People went, "That's a good idea. I like that. Christian. Who would have thought? Just Christian." Right? And then somebody else got up and said, "I think the Bible should be our only creed. So all these other historical creeds, just the Bible." And both motions passed unanimously. People were just thrilled. And from there on, this gathering tried to put together, what does this mean for us? And so they had the 6 cardinal principles of the, what church? The Christian church. Not the Methodist church, not the Episcopal church, not the Baptist or Reformed, the Christian church. Here's what it means. The Lord Jesus as the only head of the church. Not who? Not the king, not the pope, not Francis Asbury. The Lord Jesus is the head of the church. He's the one calling the shots. Like that. And then Christian, the exclusion of sectarian names. Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian. Yeah, that's not found in the Bible. It's Christian. the Holy Bible or scriptures of the Old New Testament as our only creed and sufficient rule of faith and practice. Good. Christian character or vital piety, the only test of church fellowship and membership. In other words, it's not enough just to make a confession and say, I agree with this. You have to actually live a life in harmony with that. And radical here. The right of private judgment and the liberty of conscience, the privilege and duty of all. The sixth, the union of all followers of Christ, the end that the world may believe. Let's talk about this for a second. You like this list? It seems pretty good to me, right? Where's the challenge in here? Where's the tension built? You see any difficulties in this?
Well, this becomes another creed.
Okay, yeah, we're against creeds, but is this a creed? Like, no, it's not a creed, it's just a principle. We'll call them principles, you know? More like guidelines, we'll call them that. Yes?
To determine the Christian's character.
Oh, yeah. Christian character is important. Church discipline is important. But what if we got private judgment? So what if you're a tobacco farmer and some guy says, well, I think tobacco is of Satan. I think smoking is wrong, it's sinful. You're like, excuse me, I have right of judgment here. I can read my Bible. I don't see that anywhere. So what about slavery? Slavery is wrong. It's an evil against God. Well, no, it's not. And I can read the Bible myself. Okay, so this built-in tension of, all right, if you've got individual judgment here, if you can make your own opinion about what the Bible says, then who's going to hold you responsible to it, right? And how are we going to be unified?
How to be.
Yeah. Because if you think that and I think this, how are we going to be unified? Sir?
Well, yeah, the Pandora's box is once you get past the first
Yeah.
then it goes a million directions.
Right.
Because then it's just me, simply me.
Yeah.
I think. And if you think differently, then we can fuss about that. But it just fragments us individually in so many different directions. Then we just look at people like us.
That's right. We can all agree Jesus is head of the church. When it comes down to what does that look like, how do we practice, what does worship look like when we gather together? You got your ideas and I'll get my ideas. You know what? Mine are better than yours, obviously, right? And so this tension is built into the whole thing. So this was the idea, this was the ideal, kind of hard to live out in practice. This group came to be known as Christian churches. It was one of the first widespread attempts in the U.S. to restore New Testament Christianity. Today, you go through Surrey County, Virginia. On the side of a lonely rural highway, there's a stone monument which reads, this monument marks the site of Lebanon Church, where the founders of a Christian church who had declared religious liberty and accepted the Bible as their only creed, August 4th, 1794, adopted the name Christian, the exclusion of all party and sectarian names. Pretty cool.
Where was that?
Surrey County, Virginia. Eastern Virginia. Not far from Norfolk. All right, so that's in Virginia happening. Up in New England, there's a similar movement taking place among Baptists. Now, Kelly was what kind of Christian? What's his background? Methodist, right. Well, among the Baptists up in New England, something similar is going on, because this time Baptists were strongly Calvinistic. The teaching of John Calvin, which meant predestination, which meant you're either saved or you're not, you're either elect or you're not, and it's all predetermined, you have no choice in that fact. And a lot of people, even Baptists, have struggled with that. Edward Jones said he's a physician, he was a preacher in Vermont, and he rejected this whole idea of Calvinism. He declared himself to be just a Christian, taking the scriptures alone for his authority. And so they organized a Christian church in Linden, Vermont in 1801, and Jones became a traveling evangelist, spreading the message of simple Christianity. In 1803, Jones met Elias Smith, who was also a Baptist preacher, who also had questions about Calvinism. The story goes that Smith had rebuked some young people in his church for some sin, and they said, hey, we're part of the elect, we're going to heaven, doesn't matter what we do anyway. And that really put a burr in his saddle. I mean, it really caused him to do some thinking. And he studied and came to the conclusion that Calvinism is not right. And he rejected the tenets of Calvinism. So in 1802, 10 Baptist ministers, including Smith and Jones, met at a conference in New Hampshire. Their purpose was to leave behind everything in name, doctrine, and practice not found in the New Testament. So Smith established the Church of Christ at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And Jones stopped in Portsmouth to see Smith, and they discovered, hey, we've been traveling the same trajectory all this time. We're on the same path. Let's join together. So Smith and Jones joined forces. By 1807, it established 14 congregations, Christian congregations, Churches of Christ, in New England. Called sometimes a Christian Connection, sometimes called Church of Christ. Flexible there. Perhaps Smith's biggest contribution was to publish one of the first Christian newspapers. He called it the first religious newspaper in the New World, the Herald of Gospel Liberty, in which he declared that just the United States achieved freedom from England, so Christians should seek liberty from European denominations by embracing New Testament alone. See the parallel? We set ourselves free from European politics, now let's set ourselves free from European denominations. Let's go back to the original source of the Bible. Let's do something new and fresh by going back to the early church. In his first issue, he published a document we're going to look at later, the last will and testament of the Springfield Presbytery.
Excuse me,
Yes?
I'm so sorry.
No, please.
Okay, it was, did you say that Smith was a Baptist?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Jones,
Also Baptist.
okay, that's what I thought you said.
Yes, ma'am.
But then later, you said that, or did you say, that they established the first Church of Christ?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, wait a minute. My whole family on Mama's side is Baptist. On my daddy's side, they're all Church of Christ.
Oh, my dear.
Yeah.
Growing up in your household,
But
I can't imagine.
how can two Baptists, you have thrown me, because how can two Baptists, who most of the time won't talk to each other, come up with the Church of Christ?
If that throws you, buckle your seatbelt. You're in for a soft ride coming up right here. But that's exactly the point, because they said, be part of the Baptist church meant agreeing to Calvinistic doctrine. They said that's not right. So they threw out the Calvin stuff and they said, okay, so if we're not Baptist, what are we? Christians, is what they said. We're just Christians. And so they said, so it's not Church of Christ like you and I think of it, okay? They're just saying, we're going to go back to the Bible, reject all this tradition stuff, we're going to be just Christians. And that meant church is a church of Christ. Now, another little known fact of this group was that the Christian Connection, they also had a number of women preachers.
I beg your pardon?
Sorry?
I was promised for years if I would come to the church by a friend of ours at our church today, that I could become the first deacon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how did they go for you?
Well, I came up out of that baptistry and he was standing there grinning and he said, I lied.
No! Are you serious? Oh, dear. Oh, my dear. You got no words for that. Nancy Cran was one of the early women preachers who preached throughout New England, and large crowds gathered wherever she held a revival. One person reported that there were at least 7 male preachers who converted under Nancy Cran's preaching. And one of her converts was Abigail Roberts. Abigail. Wonder where she got that name. Abigail Roberts began a 12-year preaching ministry in 1816, established at least 4 congregations, converted hundreds. Another preacher was Nancy Powell, New Hampshire school teacher, who accepted the call to preach in 1821. The following decade, she would travel, by her estimate, more than 10,000 miles, preaching the gospel wherever she was allowed. So Smith-Jones movement was so insistent upon doctrinal diversity that eventually splintered and disappeared into separate fellowships. Some joined the Stone movement and some the O'Kelly movement. Still others joined the Universalists or the Adventists. Elias Smith himself went back and forth between Universalism and the Christian Church, back and forth several times. And so, in 1931, the Christian Connection merged with the Congregational Church to form the Christian Congregational Church. 1957, the Congregational Church merged with the Evangelical and Reformed Church to become the United Church of Christ. Now, which is the denomination President Obama was part of. So we end this class period with a story. 2008. I'm a preacher in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And this particular morning, I'm at the gym, I'm working out, I'm on a treadmill, running. And in comes this small-built African-American with several other people, and he gets on the treadmill next to me. And I say, "Good morning, Senator Obama, how long are you in town?" He said, "Well, I'm here for a campaign event, just here for a couple of days." And I'm thinking, we're running beside each other, and this is my only chance, right, to maybe talk to somebody who could be significant. And so I strike up this conversation with him. And he tries to run away from me, but the treadmill keeps going, so he's not going anywhere, right? And I'm thinking, I got 20 minutes with this guy next to me. And so we struck into this great conversation. And he asked me what I'm doing, what I do. I said I'm a minister for what church? Central Church of Christ. He said, "Oh, I'm from the Church of Christ too." And I said, "You're part of the United Church of Christ?" He said, "We're more like the divided Church of Christ." And he laughed. So my claim to fame is I made a future president laugh by talking about church history. All right, so we're taking a short break here. We'll come back in about, 15 minutes? And we're going to take the next step.